Hi, this is Dumb Ghost Hunter podcast bringing on, and tonight I'm lucky to have Bob Murch, with me, the leading expert, on Ouija Board, I don't know. Bob, you need to help me right now because I don't know how to pronounce it.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's always fun to do these, so thank you.
Thank you very much. And that's the big question, right? A lot of people don't know how to pronounce it because you spell it with A, but at the same time, a lot of people say Ouija Board. People say Ouija Board. And is there a good answer, or it's as you want?
Yeah, so, we'll start with just saying Ouija is a trademark or a brand.
Okay.
It's currently owned by Hasbro. And Ouija was named in 1890 in Baltimore, Maryland. And it was originally pronounced Ouija. But really quickly, and especially by the 20s, people were saying that when they played it, they would Ouija. So it just became part of it. And very soon the manufacturers would incorporate that into, you can either say Ouija or Ouija. So either way is perfectly correct.
Oh, that's awesome. So there's, so about, as we were talking before the podcast, you've been, that's your life's work, Ouija board. And, I was looking, like I said today, at everything you have, your websites and the one you have, williamfald.com, your own website, robertmurch.com, and your Facebook page, and you're involved in a lot of things. You go to a lot of conferences, you do a lot of conference about the Ouija board. I was there. First time I met you was at Gettysburg last year with the on the panel 30-odd minutes with Jeff, Aaron Sagers, and Brian Cano, and Dave Schrader from Darkness Radio. And I was hooked. I was like, oh my God, I misconception about the Ouija board, not being scared to use it, but like, oh my God, I don't know. But, since that time that I heard you talk about it, I bought one, and I've been using it a few times, and great results. And I'm very interested in knowing how you came to be interested in, digging up the history of the Ouija board like that.
Yeah, it's really funny. It's great and wonderful, and I love it. And it's also pretty funny. I always tease everyone, like, my mom's real proud that my life's work is the history of the Ouija board. But it's true. I have spent over 20 years now digging up and working with lots of other people, collaborating with and making some really good friends, and trying to find the true story of the Ouija board. So most of us know the pop culture, urban legend, Ouija-stition history of the Ouija board, which incorporates lots of different things. And what I wanted to know was, well, where did it come from? And how is it that there was something that was so common to everybody, that's something that everybody knows about, and yet no one knows where it really comes from? I was in college when I started, and basically I noticed that every encyclopedia had a different, listing of where it came from. It all said, oh, it was used back in the days of Pythagoras. And then other ones would say that it was, something that came from America. So it took me a long time, and again, collaborating with lots of different people, to get to the point where I could find the real history. And most of that was from tracking down descendants of those who claim to be part of Ouija's inception.
Exactly, like William Fald and a lot of people, because there's been quite a battle, for people trying to say, I invented the Ouija board. It's an ongoing fight, and I know you dig the history of that, and you came up with pretty good answers, right?
Yeah, there are two people who claim to have invented what is today the Ouija board, and one of them is E.C. Resch from Chestertown, and a man named Charles Kennard, who also was living in Chestertown. And these two men knew each other, worked next to each other. And Charles Kennard claimed that he came up with the idea in 1886 and brought it to E.C. Resch, who was a woodworker, cabinet maker, furniture maker, and an undertaker, also made coffins, and asked him to, could you make me some of these? Because I think these would be popular. And according to him, people in Chestertown, Maryland, loved them. And when he asked him to go into business with him, he said, nah, I don't really see people paying for this. This is just not my thing, no. So Charles Kennard would take it to Baltimore, start a company, and start selling Ouija boards and where it was named. Now, E.C. Resch would claim that he actually invented it, and Charles Kennard took the idea. and went to Baltimore. And what we know of is in following these articles and letters and court cases is that Charles Kenner did take this idea to Baltimore, and about a year after he was making Ouija boards, E.C. Resch shows up and says to the directors, "You're making my product, and I'm not getting paid." And they do end up paying him out in stock. We don't know how he did it, but according to the company documents, E.C. Resch proved that he was the inventor and not Charles Kenner. So we don't really know. Again, without seeing the proof, we're not really sure. But these two men are the two people that claim to do it. We also know that talking boards, the general class of these games, so Ouija, again, trademark talking boards of the general of these games, came up in early 1886. And the likely, most kind of obvious answer is neither one of these gentlemen invented it. That these articles out of Ohio saying the new planchette, the talking board are sweeping Ohio, those were printed in in their newspapers. So in the Chestertown Transcript, the Kent County News, the Baltimore Sun, I found those articles. So very likely, these men read the article, kind of tinkered around with it in their head, and then came up with the idea. So today, we don't really know who exactly invented it, but we do know that, in 1890, when Charles Kenner brought it to Baltimore, that with a business partner, Elijah Bond, and Elijah Bond's sister-in-law, Helen Peters, they sat down one night in April of 1890 and asked the board what it wanted to be called, and it spelt out Ouija. And Helen Peters, who was considered a strong medium, took off her locket and showed them that it had a picture of a woman and the letters Ouija on it. So Charles Kenner, who realized that maybe the Ouija board works because of your subconscious, asked her, "Well, were you thinking of that when you were using it?" And she said no. So they adopt the word. Now, we have a theory that's just a theory, that how could she have been wearing a locket that had a word on it that didn't exist until the day it spelt it out. And what we think is that she was wearing a locket or had a picture of a famous authoress named Ouida, Ouida. And Ouida was a bit of a feminist in her own right, but not on purpose. She just believed that women should be educated and should read and write. So she wrote books specifically for women. And we do know that other women who followed her often were big fans. And so it's not unreasonable to think that Helen Peters might have been wearing one of those lockets. So that's where we think the word came from. But, so this woman, Helen Peters, if it wasn't for her, we wouldn't have the name. And she also took it to the patent office to prove to the patent office that it worked, and they gave a patent. So if it wasn't for this woman who'd been lost to history for the past 120 years, we wouldn't even be talking about this.
It's true, because I think the bad reputation that the Ouija board got started with the movie. I saw your article, Paranormal Pop Culture, that I think you write for on Aaron's website from time to time, right? Because just the last 2 weeks, I saw three articles from you.
Yeah, I've been really lucky. Aaron Sager's a great guy. He asked me, as Ouija is becoming more and more popular in pop culture, to write a couple articles. And so, for most of the Ouija board's life, if we go back, it'll start Ouija at 1890, that it wasn't considered by the huge mass general public as a tool or a doorway to the devil. It was seen as entertainment. It was sold that way. And people forget that when it came out, so if you go back to 1886, if you're coming off the Civil War, massive death, it touched everyone's lives, fathers, sons, nephews, uncles, you name it, everyone lost someone. These people just left and didn't come back. There was no iPhones or cable news to find out what happened. These people just gone. And so death was so much part of these people's lives that using a talking board or any spirit communication tool was just common. Children were working by 8 years old, and so though we protect kids today, we often don't let them go to funerals if they're too young. Back then, someone had 12 kids, 4 of them lived. People took photographs of children with their dead siblings before they buried them to remember them. Death was just it was seen differently. It wasn't. It was just something that was so in the fabric of their lives that they didn't shy away from it. So, talking to the dead, again, just not seen as horrible. Though today, with the help of Hollywood and different movies, the view on it has shifted. And it hasn't been until recently that it's even shifting back to being more acceptable in the paranormal community. When I started talking all those years ago, Jeff Belanger actually helped give me my first gig with the Ghost Hunters in Mount Washington, in New Hampshire. They asked me to come up and speak. And, back then, my first thing was, you can come up and speak, but you can't stay there, because Ouija boards upset people. And then it was, well, you can come and stay overnight, but you can't bring any boards. And then eventually it was, you can bring in boards, but you can't use them. And then eventually we got people to use them. So it's shifted over time, which is nice to see. But the kind of demonic possession part of the Ouija board was kind of really took a foothold in 1973 with the release of The Exorcist.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
That really just, a wonderful cinematic way to show demonic possession. That this little girl was using a Ouija board by herself. She then becomes possessed. The Ouija board must have been the portal. And so from then on, that's really been part of our pop culture. And then, of course, my favorite 1986 Witch Board by Kevin Tenney, which was just recently streamed live on the internet. So, he took a lot of those Ouija stitchings and wove them together to make the story of the Witch Board. And those are pretty cool things. And, Witch Board we always thought was just a common word, but in 1886, a toy company from Massachusetts actually made a talking board they called the Witch Board and sent it to President Grover Cleveland in the White House for his wedding, which it was received at the White House, and the president wrote back that he received it. So we know a Witch Board was actually in the White House in 1886.
That's incredible. That's the kind of stuff that just shows that it's, a movie can change the perception on so many things. And at the same time, it's still, I'll use it because today, a lot of people use the ghost box, and a lot of people are saying the ghost box is kind of like the Ouija board in a way that it opens a portal and spirits can come true and talk to you and stuff like that. But exactly, if you're showing respect and you do it in a good way, I don't think there's anything to be afraid of. And when we used it, we had some very cool responses that the Ouija was, matching perfectly what we got on the ghost box at the same time, which to me was like, oh my God, like asking, can you tell me your name? And receiving like, okay, Bob. And we just saying Bob at the same time that you hear Bob on your ghost box to me was like, oh my goodness, it's incredible.
Well, and that's what's really interesting. So, back, many years ago, 10 years ago plus, when, I was getting lectured at how Ouija boards were very upsetting to people, and though they wanted a little bit of controversy, they really didn't want anyone that upset. So, Jason and Grant sat us down, Jeff was there, and they were telling me about how they didn't want me to, use these boards or anything, and why. They were trying to explain why, and they were very, very nice about it. I mean, those guys are great, but they were very, against them. And then we went on a ghost hunt with them, and right after being lectured how Ouija boards, open a portal to hell, and how they see this all the time, they put down a K2 meter and pop on their EVP recorder and ask, is there anyone there? Are there any messages for me? Did anyone die here? And Jeff, smacks me and says, dude, isn't this a Ouija board session? And so, it became really clear that the difference was belief. And, Jeff talks very eloquently about belief in his lectures and how much they affect things, and especially the Ouija board. I mean, particularly the Ouija board. I mean, the fact that it's so old that next year the Ouija board will celebrate its 125th birthday. So 125 years, generations of stories, all kinds of things, from the First World War to, Operation Desert Storm, all of these things that it's seen everything. So we have a lot of stories, and people's belief really affects it. So if you believe that the Ouija board's trouble, it will be. And if you don't believe, if you think that a K2 meter is perfectly safe, then you're fine. And I watch this all the time. You know, if we had planted that there was some haunted evil K2 meter and told people about it, I can guarantee you that people would not be playing with K2 meters. But again, it's that there are so many stories that people believe. And I always tell people, you know, it's funny to me, technology seems to make people feel safer.
Yeah,
like,
so true.
if I put this down and it just blinks, I'm safe. You know, I can't make a K2 meter blink on command. You know, my mind can't make it work. So if something can without touching it, that's a little scary, right? Like, so why can't it pick it up and hawk it at your head?
Yeah,
We just believe that, it can. It's just, it's only going to make it blink. But I don't. So Lorraine Warren, who most of your listeners I'm sure know of, she's just a legend in this field.
Oh my God!
And I've known her for a long time because I love Ouija boards. She hates them. So we're often on different ends of this. But I spent like 8 hours filming with her for a documentary that I was working on. And in the end, we really agreed on this, which was Lorraine doesn't think Ouija boards are any more dangerous than any other spirit communication tool because the danger is in the act of conjuring. Calling something to you to communicate with you is what is dangerous, that you have now opened communications with something that you don't really know or understand. What you use is irregardless, or I shouldn't say that, that's not a word. It's, like regardless of what you use, you're still as much in the unknown. So whether you use tarot cards or you use a K2 meter, all of these things...
Or a ghost box, or you're right.
Or a ghost box, anything. You're opening up communication. Now, she likes Ouija boards less because they're so easily accessible and sold in the toy stores so that children can... And my historical argument back is they've always been sold in the toy stores. And again, when they were created, we viewed death differently. And so the Ouija board hasn't changed. We've changed. Society's views on things have changed. But this has always been this way.
It's true. It's totally true. And, I was your... so you've had a chance to spend an hour with Lorraine Warren. So that's totally amazing. She's, the first lady of paranormal, with her husband. I know now a lot of people know them because they've seen the movie The Conjuring. But I've had a chance to investigate once with John Zaffis, and he's their nephew. And John is, I'm sure you agree with me, one of the... not one, probably the nicest man on the field. And, he's the godfather of paranormal. And, Lauren is a legend, and she's a sweet... She seems to me like the sweetest person you can meet. And, it must have been an honor for you to be able to do a documentary with her.
Yeah, she's just a wonderful person. And, if you spend 8 hours with anybody, I'm pretty impressed. I was mostly impressed with her belief. So I don't believe... that they are dangerous in the same way that most people do. And so we disagree on that. But I will say that having sat with her and asking her questions, undeniably she believes in what she says. She's not just throwing stuff out there. And that was fascinating. As far as John Zaffis is a great guy. Chip Coffey, another great guy. Jeff Belanger, awesome. We're really lucky, and I've been really lucky to work with some amazing people in the paranormal field who've really taken a chance on talking to me and working with me on a subject that's very controversial in this field. To me, I love them. I have, over 500 different boards in my collection, and that doesn't include variations. That's just completely different ones. If you're talking about variations or even some doubles, you're getting into the thousands. And, I tell people all the time that the scariest thing in my house are the people who live in it, not the things that are there. So I just have never had any negative experience. I've had many Ouija sessions. I've used them lots, especially at these conventions in Australia where Jeff and I just were. We had 74 Australians playing Ouija boards, which is just completely unheard of. Culturally, they're just not acceptable, and they never took off there as they did in the United States. So it was really neat. And, it's been cool to be part of educating people. And again, it goes to show, if you do your work, if you're really good at it, and you don't rest on your laurels, you just keep digging and do your research. eventually people in higher places notice it and, incorporate it into their stuff. So, I love seeing presentations today which talk about the things I've been talking about for 20 years, and articles being read, and Aaron asking me to write on Paranormal Pop Culture. All those things are wonderful, and nice to see that the paranormal field is opening their minds to other people's opinions, because, again, the whole paranormal world is about belief. So,
you're right.
It's really neat.
Exactly, and I was also, reading on your website that, in 2007 you discovered Elijah Jefferson's bones unmarked grave in Green Mountain Cemetery in Baltimore, Maryland, and then you worked to have him, have a proper, burial place, and that's, to me, absolutely amazing. And was it something that you stumbled upon, or you did a lot of research to be able to get to that cemetery?
Oh yeah, that was 15 years in the making. One of the things I do to find descendants of the people. So when I first started, William Folt invented the Ouija board, and it's been used since Pythagoras. So having to just find out who the people were was a little bit of work. And then I noticed and had to learn genealogy. As a historian, you have to master a lot of different things. Genealogy is one of the single most important things you have to learn if you're going to do research and you're trying to find living descendants. You just have to figure out how to search for people. And, Elijah Bond was one of those people. He moved quite a few times. That made it difficult. And eventually, we found him in Greenmount Cemetery in Baltimore. He was buried in an unmarked grave. And strangely enough, 2 weeks after I found his grave, I also found his grandnephew, who was 99 years old at the time. And his name was Walter Dent, and he was the closest living descendant to him. And again, 99 years old. Like, think about this. And he remembered his Uncle Elijah. So I was talking to someone who knew a person I was researching, as opposed to talking to someone's, granddaughter or grandson who didn't meet the person. They died before they were born. So I was talking to someone who knew him, and he was impressed enough with my research that he granted and gave us permission to put in a gravestone as a memorial to Elijah Bond. So, for people who want to go see it, it's funny that this story gets, again, we did this in 2007, it's gotten picked up, especially recently, where different things like Obscura Atlas and other articles have been written about it. But if you look up Elijah Bond and, Ouija headstone, it'll come up and you can visit it. It's the most visited headstone in their cemetery. And it has a Ouija board on the back. It's his drawing that he put in his patent. That's what we put on the back. And on the front, it has his name with patentee of the Ouija board. So that is a project that was really fun. It was a nice way to give back. My main goal, my ultimate goal, is to save this history so that it doesn't get lost. Because I'm not writing anything new. It's just got forgotten. So I'm not finding anything like that's crazy. It's just that it had been forgotten and buried over the years. So the people who were involved in it, their stories have just been swallowed by time, just like Helen Peters. And so for all these years, no one knew that a woman had a major part of the story of Ouija. And, the Ouija board had a mother. And, last year I was lucky enough to track down her grandson and find him in Ohio, and he knew all the stories. So everything that I had heard or there were letters about, he corroborated that his grandmother told him the exact same things. And he actually gave me a drawing that her husband, who was an artist, did of her, and a photograph, so we knew what she would look like. And she actually is buried in another unmarked grave. And pretty soon, in the next 2 weeks, we are going to kick off a Kickstarter project to raise money to put in a gravestone for the woman who named the Ouija board.
That's absolutely amazing. And so, there's so many things we could do, probably a podcast for 5 hours, like I said before. So that's, the first but not the last podcast we'll do together, because it's impossible for me to go through the, I think I got 150 questions, so we can cover it in 1 hour, Robert.
Yeah, no, ask anything. But, my goal ultimately is to record the history and preserve it. And that kind of got me to, with a bunch of other great people, found the Talking Board Historical Society, which we did this year. Kind of founded it last year, but we incorporated it this year, and it is going to be responsible for preserving these things that I had been working on in the past, like William Fold's biggest factory in Baltimore. We had made a historic monument, so we worked with the city, and currently I'm working with the city to make and celebrate Ouija's 125th anniversary. So April 25th, that weekend, is going to be a big weekend in Baltimore where the city and a lot of different parts of the city and a lot of people are going to get together to kind of do a lot of fun things.
And this took 10 years, I was reading on your website, 10 years of hard work to do this event. In 2012 was the first one you did, and was an absolute success.
It's just been, we've been lucky, that again, people have been so open to the history, and very lucky that the family members of the Folds, the Kennards, the Peters, the Bowies, the Russ, all the Rushes, all these people. I mean, imagine someone calling you and telling you, this thing is my life's work, my passion. I'm fascinated by it. I can't let it go. I'm obsessed by it. And I found out that your family member was involved in it. Like, would you talk to me? I mean, I don't know. I might hang up the phone on the person, but I've never been hung up on. The people have actually become incredibly good friends, and the Folds definitely are at the top of that list. Just wonderful families. This journey for me has been more about making, lifetime friends and going places I never thought I'd go, traveling the world talking about it. I've just been, I've been incredibly lucky. I'm living the dream.
That's incredible because, that's what you say on your website. There's not only the Ouija board, there's a lot of talking boards, the Oracle board also, there's so many of them. And, you have to tell me more about the fact that in 2011, you deciphered the symbols of the Nirvana board and if I don't spell it correctly, the Swastika board. And tell me more about, again, I'm sure it's years and years and years of digging and work to be able to decipher all these symbols.
Well, this was kind of fun, and it was another fun collaboration, which was, so Elijah Bond, who patents the Ouija board, he takes Kennard's idea and goes into business with him. They start a company, and he patents the Ouija board. And after he leaves the company in 1907, the end of 1907, he makes another company. When the patent runs out, he makes a new board called the Nirvana board or the Swastika board. And people hear swastika and think, oh my gosh, this is, we're talking about Nazis, but, again, way before that, we're talking about 1907 when the symbol was seen more as, a Hindu or good luck or a power symbol. And so that's how he was interpreting it and using it. But there were other symbols on the board, and they were little drawings of, like, one of them is like an elephant coming out of a snail shell, and, it had different things on it. And we were kind of wondering, well, what are they? First of all, what are these symbols? Because they're very hand-drawn looking. They're not perfect the way, we would know exactly what they were, but what was his interpretation of them? And so, when you follow people through time, you make a timeline. Well, where was he at certain times? And it turns out he was in London at the same time an exhibition was going on where many jewels had these carvings inside of them. And all of them actually were in this exhibit. And so I was, in working with the Museum of London, able to find out what these were and kind of, what do they think they meant? And, unless we find the instructions for this board that supposedly tell us what the symbols are, we can only kind of extrapolate what we think that they would mean. But all of these things are like that. Everything's a mystery. What happened? How did this person get here? What are they making? Who makes this board? So there are hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of these boards, and we try, again, lots of collaborating with lots of other websites, and a great website and a friend and mentor of mine is Gene Orlando's Museum of Talking Boards. That is a fantastic one. If people are looking to find a website with other spirit communication things like planchettes or spirit trumpets or dial plates, that's a great place is mysteriousplanchet.com. That's a good friend, Brandon Hodge. He runs that website. And so, I don't do anything alone. I am mostly, putting these pieces together, but it wouldn't happen without collaborating with a lot of great people. So, whether that's museums, libraries, state archives, national archives, White House, Library of Congress, you name it. If someone has a piece of the puzzle, I will end up at their doorstep.
Exactly. Kind of like what we do when we investigate. So, do you also do paranormal investigations?
Yeah, I do at these conferences, and I'm asked to go a lot, which is wonderful, and I love doing it because, in the beginning, talking boards were what spiritualists or ghost hunters or paranormal investigators would have in their bag of tricks. Like, they would use this. And people always say, well, isn't that weird that the talking boards were born out of the spiritualist movement and then immediately shunned by them? And, there's a really easy answer to this. Like, it's a very practical answer. So up until talking boards, there were other spirit communication things like planchettes, but they were not mass-produced in the same way, in the amount that talking boards were. So 1890 is an important year for production in the United States. Huge factories were being put up. Things were being knocked out in numbers the country had never seen before. Major industrialization, right? And so talking boards, all of a sudden, people, if you wanted to have a seance, you hired a medium. And you either went to their place or they came to yours and you paid them. Well, here for, $1 to $1.50, you could have a mini seance in your house and you were doing it. You were in charge. It was all you. You didn't have to depend on anybody else. So what does that do? That takes a hit out of the medium's paycheck. And so immediately we see mediums who were using talking boards coming out against them, saying things like, these things are dangerous, they're opening doors to this unseen world. You need someone who has the experience and who's educated in this world to guide you through it. And, what are they really saying? They're saying, hey, this took a chunk out of my pay, so I don't like these things anymore. And that was the beginning of some things we hear today. You're opening doors to things you don't know about. You can't close them. And I would just tell people, people often say to me, well, using them, you don't know who you're going to talk to. You don't know who you're going to get. And I just say to them, well, it wouldn't stop me. I go on the train into Boston. I live in Boston. So I jump on the train, my line to go in town, and I don't know the people on the train, but I still talk to them. I could be talking to a psycho killer. I also could be talking to the nicest person I'll ever meet. I kind of take that chance. So for me, those arguments just fall a little flat. And again, you don't know who you're talking to on a K2 meter or an EVP recorder or a ghost box or a planchette or a spirit trumpet. That's why we're investigating.
That's incredible. In Boston, that's cool because half of my teammates are in Boston, in the Gloucester area, Mark, Lauren, and Mike. And I go there often to investigate with them. So maybe one of these days we can team up, especially now in the summer. It's a lot more fun to investigate, at this temperature than minus 40 degrees. So a lot more interesting to go to Salem in the summertime than wintertime.
Exactly.
And, something else, that we talked before, because, when I went to Gettysburg last year, there was a 30-odd minutes video of you and Jeff Belanger, driving and using the Ouija board as a GPS. That was so funny. And for those who never saw that 30-odd minutes, I'll post it on my Facebook page on my Twitter later on. It was so cool, and at the same time, he did the same thing with the Ghost Box with Chris Fleming, which was so funny. But now I want you to tell me what happened, on that flight that you took with Jeff, going to Australia. That we talked about before the podcast.
Yeah, so Jeff and I were really lucky, and we got picked to speak at Paracon this year in Australia. So Jeff and I flew on literally the other side of the world. If you go into Google Maps and you put in Boston, Massachusetts, and then you try to find the furthest point away, it's off the coast of Australia. So if I go any direction from where I was, I would be getting closer to home, which is really crazy to think about. So as far away as we could be and still be on the planet, that's where we were. And as we were flying, for people who know this, it's about a 22, 23-hour flight. We had to do Boston to LA to Sydney. So it's a long time on an airplane, which I always say I'm scared of Jeff Belanger. I now know why I'm afraid of him after being on a flight with him that long. he was great. He was a lot of fun, as he always is. And one of the things we decided we wanted to do, because we've done this trick before, is we wanted to film us playing the Ouija board on the plane. We're better at it now. We know how upsetting it can be to some people to see, so we didn't do it until the last half hour. So once they say, "Oh, it's a half an hour, 30 minutes left, we'll be landing," that's when we grabbed it, and we asked a man sitting next to us to video us, and we used the Ouija board, and basically, right around that time is when the plane went missing in Australia. So we asked the board. One of the questions we asked was, where is the missing flight? And it was really funny to watch people's uncomfortableness. The point of it was to show how awkward you can make a plane. You could say all kinds of things like, well, what would make a flight uncomfortable or awkward? And there could be a lot of answers, but I can tell you for a fact, playing the Ouija board, it probably tops the list, because I've never seen so many people's attention get grabbed and just stare and kind of cock their head like, what's happening? If you pull out a Ouija board and you put it on your meal tray and ask a question, it was pretty interesting. So it ended up in the presentation that I gave down there. Of course, Jeff is incredibly artistic, and he loves to film lots of different things. So he also likes to get me in trouble, which he often does.
Exactly. And Jeff is a researcher and historian like you, so that's probably why you get along, because Jeff is doing amazing work, for his in New England, ghost stories and stuff like that. He's the kind of guy that it's probably fun to sit around a campfire.
Jeff is fun to sit around with anywhere. If I had to be next to anyone on a 23-hour flight, Jeff Belanger would have been my choice, and he lived up to that. It was a lot of fun, and he's a great guy. Yeah, Jeff and I met many years ago. I think it was 2000 or 2001. It was in research for one of his books. One of his books, he was doing a chapter on Ouija boards, and he called me up, and we've just been friends since. He's a great guy. I really like him because of his dedication. His humor, he brings a lot of humor to the field that's much needed, and he does his research. Again, I respect other people who really put in their time, and Jeff truly puts in his time.
Exactly, kind of like Aaron Sager's the same way. People are passionate about what they do, like you, and there's the kind of people that further this field, and makes the paranormal field go from, 10 years ago, if you would have gone and say, I'm a paranormal investigator, you would have get laughed out of the building. People will go, what? And today, it's cool. You can say it, and everybody's going to be like, oh my God. Like where I work, I tell people I'm investigating, and nobody's laughing at me. Everybody's like, oh my God, that's so cool. But I can't imagine saying that 10 years ago.
Yeah, I agree with you. Now it is cool to be considered a Ouija board expert and to collect Ouija boards. It was not always cool. It was something you could use to scare off the Mormons, but that was pretty much it.
Exactly, and I know you're working right now on a new website called TalkingBoards.com, and you have your Facebook page. And can you give us a little bit of where people can follow you on Twitter? Also, you have your Twitter account.
Yeah, my handle on most things is Talking Boards. So if you look me, on Twitter, I'm Talking Boards. On Facebook, my public page. So, go out there, check it out, give it a like, pass it on. That's Facebook.com/Talking Boards, with an S. Same thing on Instagram, it's Talking Boards. If you go to TalkingBoards.com, or if you want to look up and kind of see about me, it's Robert Murch, MURCH.com, and you can see the things I'm doing, what I'm into, and you can follow me on Twitter, and if you have a Ouija board that you're looking to get rid of because it's bothering you, I love to take those orphan Ouija boards and give them a home. I love the stories that are with them, so I'd like people to share. And on the Facebook page, I try to every couple of days post an interesting Ouija story and some do some little history fact fun things. So.
And you also have now posting regularly on ParanormalPopCulture.com for Aaron's website, which is also very cool. And but before the podcast ends, I wanted to ask you your probably your most personal or best experience you ever had using the Ouija board or any talking boards, matter of fact?
You know, I'll just tell a quick story. So again, for me, the story of the Ouija board is all about the people who were involved, and that's led me to the people who were left alive to share the story. So I'll just tell you, like it's done, a couple of two things. One, back in 1997, I think it was, I had my first website. It was terrible. It was horrible. It was like back when people didn't know how to do code at all, and I think they were still calling it the interweb at the time. And I had animated GIFs, and it was just terrible. But two things happened that were wonderful at it. One was the granddaughter William Fold contacted me, and the grandson of Isaac Fold, and just to kind of make it really quick, William and Isaac used to make Ouija boards together, and they got into a fight. And Isaac was cut out of the Ouija board business. They would fight about this for 20 years. So in 1901, a feud started that broke the family in two, and it lasted. It was still going in 1997. And I thought, oh no, they both contacted me. When I tell the other side that I'm talking to them, they're probably just going to cut me off. And it turns out that each side had the answers that the other side was asking me. They were saying, well, what about this? And then the other people would be telling me about it. So I told Kathy, and one night she called up her equal, her cousin on the other side, and they buried the hatchet, and that summer we had the first the Fold family reunion that had happened in 96 years. So the Ouija board had torn this family apart, and then because of the research, the Ouija board put the family back together again. So that's one of my really cool stories is people think they're bad, but they've only done wonderful things for me. They really have. And then another kind of cool story is that in my researching Charles Kennard, I had read an article, same thing in 1997, that someone had interviewed his son, who was still alive. I called up. The woman asked me if it was a joke that I was looking for this man, and I said no, and she said, well, it must be a joke because he died a couple weeks ago, or 3 days ago or something. And I thought, oh my God, this is horrible. And I called later on. We talked again. She was just, upset, obviously, at the passing of her ex-husband, and she gathered a bunch of stuff that was about the Ouija board that Charles Kennard had given to his son, and unfortunately, all of that stuff was picked up by Goodwill and thrown out, like completely lost forever. Last year, I tracked down a descendant from Charles Kennard's first wife. So this was her great-granddaughter I had found. She ended up having a photograph of Charles Kennard, the only photograph we know of, and lots of information about him. The neat thing about the photograph was, on the back, it was from the person who died, Charles Kennard's son, sending it to her half-sister, his half-sister, who was the descendant that I was speaking to from that line. Had he not mailed that photograph to her in 1966, it would have been thrown out in 1997. So there's always these weird things that happen as you research the Ouija board, and those are the most amazing things to me, are the history and the fact that families have preserved such amazing things.
That's incredible, Robert. And, it was a pleasure to have you on the podcast, and really looking forward to have you back anytime because, like I said, I was not able to cover half the questions I had, but that's okay because, it's going to give me some material for next interview that we have together because there's so much more, but at the same time, I think it really covered a little bit of your history and, the professionalism that you put into your work. And that's probably the reason why now you're invited to every conferences and you're respected in the field and you become the spokesperson for the Ouija board, in a way.
Well, it's great, and thanks for saying that. I take the work seriously, and again, I wouldn't do anything unless it was fun. It's always been fun.
Oh, thank you very much, Robert. So thanks, everybody, for listening. You can also listen to the podcast on my teammates, Marisa, Encounters with the Unexplained, which is terrifyingtales.blogspot.ca, or on my YouTube channel. I'm going to post it later on tonight. And I'll send the links, Robert, for the, 30-odd minutes with you and Jeff from Gettysburg was awesome with Chris Fleming and Brian Cano. I watch every 30-odd minutes, but this one was my favorite because I was there live, but at the same time, it was very interesting to hear, Dave Schrader's opinion, yours, Chris Fleming. It was very, very great, lecture.
Yeah, 30-odd minutes is a great show, and thanks so much for having me, and we'll be talking soon, I'm sure.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening, and thank you, Robert, for your time.
All right, have a good night.
All right, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.